Beep, 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 beep. Morning, Jester. It's a bit warmer today. Thank goodness. Thank goodness for a bit of heat. I've got a couple of interesting things here. There was an article in the Telegraph that prompted this, and there's another great article by a fantastic writer who is, I've mentioned before, but I will mention once again, and I will put all the links in the doobries for you that you need, is Dr. M, who Dr. M has done some tremendous work in the field, particularly in examining some of the darker corners of the gender and culture problems at the LGBTQI hands, knees and bumps of daisy folk, right? So Dr. M's done some good stuff on that, but it's worth taking a look at both of these things that I'm going to point out to you today because they are both interesting in their own way, and the Telegraph has asked a very serious question. This also comes in light of the appalling Stonewall propaganda that was released in video form, which was a slap in the face to gay men and lesbians who have undergone conversion therapy, in that they have tried to shape the idea that somebody is trans is the same as somebody who's gay. There is nothing connecting those two things. Right? Somebody claims a trans identity. That's as far as I'm concerned, particularly in the young, is a red flag the size of Ohio. Right? Wanting to cut bits off your body and not be real about who you are is a very dangerous idea indeed. We know this. I've said it before. I'm not going to go through it again. But have a look at the Stonewall video. Absolute propaganda. Disgusting. And attempting to infer that the psychology industry is doing this type of thing is absolutely surreal. Surreal. So you need to see that. It's disgusting. I was completely gobsmacked by it, to be frank. I really was. So you have a look and let me know what you think. That's the first thing. Have a look at that, right? Secondly, the article from the Telegraph, which came from a guy called Harry de Ketville, which is a rather nice name. So thank you for your article, Harry, which poses the question, why teenage girls are on the front line of the trans war. Fueled by a lack of government guidance, many say controversial gender ideology is being promoted in schools under the guise of inclusivity. Well, it's the 21st of January 2023, and many women and some men, including my good self, have been saying this over and over and over for a very long time, that the schools are infested with this template of grievance oppression and affinity groups, all the stuff that comes with it for some time and needs to go. So what they're saying is here there's a lack of government guidance. Well, first off, it worries me greatly that we have a situation where people who are teaching the young, who are generally intelligent people, who understand their teaching, who are very committed to their job, you'd have to be, let's be honest, right? Okay, because it's not the easiest job in the world at all. It's a very hard job indeed. Need that much guidance to tell them that this cult-like behaviour isn't a problem. That's the first thing. Although I feel that they are probably feeling silenced like everybody else, that teachers are in a terrible bind, that they are stuck between a rock and a hard place. So maybe it is the government's guidance that is needed, not because they need the guidance, but because they need the backing of the government to be able to tell anyone who is pushing this that you are out of the profession. You're gone. All right? Get out. Okay? My daughter, says the article, this is talking about somebody in particular, has decided to identify as male. She is 13. She decided this and told me the day after a PSHE, and for those that don't know, that's personal, social health and economic education, that took place in a school in Nottingham in year 8. This was a girls' school, actively promoting gender ideology. The first thing they were told in the tutor group when they arrived in year 7, so they joined in year 7, year 8's the second year at that school, was that they should choose any pronouns they wanted. That was in Wiltshire, right? Okay. Second one, my daughter is in year 7. Within the first few months of secondary school, she started talking endlessly about her gender identity. She had been taught at school that there are many genders. Yorkshire. There's a connection here. Yorkshire, Wiltshire. Ham. No, that's not a connection. What's wrong with you, Barry? See, we're pattern-seeking creatures. Across the country, if parental testimonials gathered on the Free to Speak website, linked downstairs, are to be believed, something profound is occurring in schools under the banner of tolerance and inclusivity. Children are being encouraged to challenge their fundamental biology, to question their sex and the deep assumptions they have made about their identities. Well, I've got a problem with this article. Identity is immaterial, right? People talk about identity all the time. Stop it. Stop it. It's immaterial identity. What does that even mean? It doesn't mean anything, right? It's just a free-floating signifier that idiots can use to confuse children. All right, so children are being encouraged to challenge their fundamental biology. Well, we have to remember that when they start doing that, that's the end, really. It leads to irreversible damage if we're not careful. That's why socially transiting children is not a non-medical intervention. It is a medical intervention, and it is iatrogenic, which means it harms. What we think is a problem to be solved, and then solving that problem, the solution is the harm, iatrogenic. Good word, iatrogenic. So we have to remember this, and it's mostly adolescent girls. Wasn't self-harm mostly adolescent girls? Isn't there currently a thing going on the old socials where girls develop tics and they're doing it en masse? We've seen this before. Helen Joyce has spoken about this. We've seen this before. As one account by Julie, who was 14, the 14-year-old girl giving testimony, puts it, controversial gender ideology has taken over my school. There's been a rapidly increasing number of teenagers coming out as transgender. Entire friends groups suddenly emerge as non-binary or genderqueer. This has nothing to do with being same-sex attracted folk, remember? It's a social contagion. Flags in the school hallways bear the mottos, demi-boy, asexual, non-binary and polysexual. Wankers. It then goes on to talk about Dr. David Bell, who we know worked for the Gender Identity Development Service and has been a stalwart defender of reality throughout this entire nonsense. Anyway, read. It's a good article in the Telegraph. It's worth a read, but that's not the main reason why I read it, because we know all about Stonewall and mermaids and free to be and other training nonsense that's got itself into bloody schools. It's as bad as it is in business with Athena Swan and the race charter and all the other crap that comes with that. So it's all there. But again, they're saying the lack of government guidance is a problem. Now, the government can only do too much, but on the other hand, it's nothing to stop it making a declarative statement. This is bullshit. Here's a list. They can make a declarative statement. Stop it and stop it now. They already have. Teaching the wrong body narrative in schools is already against government guidance, but what's not happening is it's not being enforced. And it's not being enforced because Ofsted is captured. We know this. I've been through this before. Right. So bear this in mind, because I think that's the first one, right? Then there's a second one, which is very interesting. By Dr. M. Again, you see by Dr. M here, which is all about why woke blokes abuse women. And it's fascinating, right? Okay, because we have a situation where girls in the schools, as I've just previously mentioned, are running from their womanhood, are running from their sex, are running from wanting to become women. The idea of the removal of the breasts, the escape from womanhood, from what they see as womanhood, which they then see as, for some reason, as problematic. And I think one of the reasons may be exactly what Dr. M is talking about. This is Dr. M speaking. The trans sex role stereotype movement, what a great way to put it, has put what would have been concealed and kept behind closed doors on centre stage. That is why normal, decent men look aghast at other men's behaviour, while many women sigh with an "oh, this again." The woke bloke contempt for women is clear, and abusive behaviours are on full display. There's a book by Lundy Bancroft called Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men, and I think more men could do with reading it. The full cast of characters is present on Twitter, in the news and in our political parties and institutions. Bancroft's insights come from working with angry and controlling men for 15 years as a counsellor, evaluator and investigator, and having accumulated a wealth of knowledge from the 2,000 or more cases with which he's been involved. Okay, so what Bancroft argues is that it is values which cause abuse, not personality, or mental disorders, or a childhood history of abuse, or alcohol or drugs. Those factors only exacerbate an existing problem. The value system of the man, right, and we're talking about men here, 98% of all this nonsense is men. The value system of a man, if it's wrong, can make him most dangerous. It is their value system that is unhealthy. So that's the root cause. It is the psychology that subsequently erupts from the degraded value system that causes men to be abusive in whatever way that may be, controlling, or it could be absolute violent abuse, sexual abuse. That's what it causes. And then Dr. M talks clearly about the crossover between trans rights activists, incels, and men's rights activists. And I've said this before, it's a men's rights movement, right? That they are actually a problem. And itemised again by Dr. M, forced teaming, which is so important that everybody gets their head around, can only explain so much in the face of evidence. But it's misogynistic values and pornography use which are driving the phenomenon. So what Dr. M is doing here is drawing a link between pornography and behaviours. Yeah, right, okay, which is a very valid link that needs discussing. I've not done that one yet, but eventually I'm going to get to it, and we're going to start looking at that in depth, and particularly trying to understand how that's affecting men. Men who bully and abuse women have dehumanised them and cannot see them as equals. What's happened there? It's almost like the very worst of pornography is the very best of propaganda. Right? Now, if it's the very best of propaganda, the more extremes that we're seeing, the most extreme examples we're seeing, are what are driving some men. Again, you know, for the men, I'm going to say to you, it's not all of us, all right? But it's enough of us for it to be a problem. And even if they take a special identity, I'm trans or I'm poly or I'm, you know, Napoleon, even if they take a special identity, it does not in any way preclude them from the fact that men, 98% of violence and sexual assault is by men, all right? This is why safeguarding exists, okay? So reading this particular article from Dr. M, which is in Wings Over Scotland, I think is a good thing for men to do. So men, get reading, right, and understand what it is that Dr. M is saying. We then go through how this has manifested itself. For example, the term TERF. Interestingly, where did that come from? How was it coined? Then the women embracing that term in a traditional grassroots activist way is explained and unfolded here by Dr. M in this great article. The woke bloke's online behaviour is mirrored in the behaviour of the domestic abuser. Go and have a think about that. Go and have a good think about that. Right? The trans movement, particularly in this respect, is individual male abuse of women turned into a group movement. If the woman does not play nice quickly, narcissism, male entitlement, the whole works. It's there. The abuser always focuses on feelings rather than facts. This is fascinating because it draws into my mind the idea of victimhood movements. Victimhood movements, yeah, where they pretend that they're the one that's being abused. They practice DARVO, deny, accuse, reverse, victim and offender. DARVO. And in doing so, make themselves shiny and bright in terms of their victimhood and therefore are beyond reproach. And just so that you're clear, every single totalitarian movement in history has been a victimhood movement. Every single one. They all end up in the same place. Darkness, right? So, a red flag, as is said here by Dr. M, is that abusers externalise responsibility for their actions. Indeed, everything is someone else's fault. And that someone else is usually a her. Purely by dint of numbers, right? Purely by dint of numbers. The woke bloke, like the abuser behind closed doors, is seeking to control women and feels that it is his right to control others. Thus, he expects to have the last word and believes he is justified in punishing those who would challenge it. So I'm going to say it. I think the woke bloke does that because he's a damn coward. Right? I think the woke bloke does that because he feels like his back's up against the wall because he knows his value system is utterly corrupt. And that corruption in his initial value system has perverted his personality, has influenced his judgment, and has meant that he wanders the earth without any sense of human decency whatsoever. How about that? Swain. Right? Okay. Again, we need to look closely at what the article said because not only does Dr. M go into explaining her take on this and what we should be looking at and how we should consider what she's saying, but she also gives you multitudes of examples. And then she finishes with a great conclusion, which I'll finish with for you. While it does not necessarily follow that woke blokes are abusing women behind closed doors, the point of this essay is that they share the value system of domestic abusers. They've got the same value system. The worldview that enables the abusive male we encounter in a domestic violence setting has become more common as females are dehumanized and objectified by pornography. This is the one reason why the misogynistic transgender movement has managed to spread so quickly. It's wonderfully researched article, and it's got a wonderful list of other sources to go and have a look at. Would you agree with all of it? Probably not. Doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter. When it comes to this milieu, we've got to get it out there. Freedom of speech is very important, and what Dr. M is doing is absolutely taking advantage of her ability to speak and to do so with clarity and with great insight and with obviously great understanding. So it's time to have the conversation. What value system is driving wokeness? What value system is driving incels? What value system is driving the violent? And what does our tolerance for this as a society say about us? So at that point, we then get to, hang on a minute, we killed God. And we're into really, where do we get our value systems from, in a fascinating look at what do we need to do to prevent what is going to be the ongoing subjugation and mistreatment of women by men, if we are not able to say to them, your standard of behaviour, your underlying value system is corrupt. At which point they will politicise it and they will say, no, what you're talking about is conservative values. And they'll go all, soy boy and latte. That's what they'll say. It's not conservative values. It's basic decency. And there are many men, including men who I know who are gay, who have lost the ability to be basically decent or to have some kind of principles that they will not compromise. Groucho Marx, here are my principles. If you don't like them, I've got others. That's how they're living. Anyway, go and read Dr. M's article, right? At some point, some of us are all going to get together and have a chat about all this. And God knows where it'll fall out. Because I tell you, I read Dr. M's stuff. I don't agree with it all, right? But so what, right? Listen to the voices of these women who have been telling us this for a long time. And then all of a sudden, some of us are now going, hang on a minute. I actually saw somebody say it the other day. Where are the women with this? Where have you been? Go and read the article. Follow the people who've been telling us for a long time that we've got a problem. Okay? And they know that we've got a problem because this is how men behave. This is how abusive men behave. This is how men hide behind a facade of niceness with their narcissistic compassion and the fact that they will make sure that whatever happens, they're never going to take responsibility for everything because it's always somebody else's fault. That's what they do, right? So you go and read Dr. M's article, and I think it's a good conversation starter for people to begin talking about what exactly is going on with the corruption of value systems. And I'm particularly addressing men here because when it comes to this particular issue, misogyny, sexual assault, general assault, mistreatment of people, men are the ones that are doing the most of it. Men are the ones that are doing the most of it. All right? So that's why we have to do it. Don't make me say not all men. You know what I mean. Right, so go and have a read. Fascinating article. Thank you very much, Dr. M. And thank you very much for the article about girls in the Telegraph. And watch the Stonewall conversion thing. This is all connected, folks. You just gotta find the links, right? Why did Stonewall choose a boy instead of a girl? Go well.